Okay. Welcome, everyone. Glad that you can join us for our virtual town hall meeting tonight to talk about PK2 instruction. Before we jump in, I know we've got a lot of information to share and probably lots and lots of questions, but I want to welcome you this evening and thank you for joining us this evening. Before we jump in, I did want to share our 3 pillars that support our vision and mission in City Schools of Decatur: advancing racial equity, accelerating student learning, and building and sustaining a positive school climate. We believe in City Schools of Decatur that our work focused on these 3 core areas will help us achieve our mission and vision to help students be their best, achieve their dreams, and to make the world a better place. We are well aware that this is a very stressful time for our parents, our students, our staff members, and we hope that the information presented in this session will help alleviate even just a little bit of those fears and anxiety level for you parents. And any staff members that are also joining us tonight. We're going to do a brief round of introductions, then followed by our pre-K overview for virtual instruction in pre-K for grades pre-K through 2. Then we've got some frequently asked questions that we're going to review. We've pulled these questions from lots and lots of the questions that were sent into the form, as well as our opening 2020 email group. Then we're going to discuss where you can find more information and then wrap up with what are some of the next steps that you can expect. With that said, I'm going to pass the baton over to our Executive Director of Curriculum and Instruction, Dr. Kristy Beam.
Hello, and thank you for joining us. As Maggie said, we got a lot of questions, and I tried to chunk those and address most of them in the overview, but if we miss anything, we will address those at the end. So on the next slide, we have a little quote that has kind of been my guiding light since March. The future is uncertain, but this uncertainty is at the very heart of human creativity. And for me, like everyone else, virtual learning is not where I would choose to be, but that is a health and safety issue. So I have to remind myself that I can choose to focus on the negatives of it, or I can look at this as an opportunity to look at our schools through a fresh lens. And while there's some very difficult decisions about being face-to-face or virtual, my role here is to ensure that we can offer our students the best instruction regardless of the environment. So I'd like to give you, just a few minutes, maybe a 5-minute overview of face-to-face classroom of 2020 and how that might translate online. So the expectations for today's classroom are that they are student-centered, and that means that students talk more than the teacher, that they're collaborative, that they're problem-based, and that means that a typical lesson might look like a teacher would provide a short lesson where they unpack the learning targets to ensure that students know what they will be learning during the lesson. The direct instruction from the teacher might last around 15 minutes at this age. And then students might work independently in small groups where a teacher is monitoring the learning, or the teacher is working with a small group of students while and then the class may come back together and do a debrief and assess learning. It's important that we understand what a classroom looks like so we can think about how that might translate into the virtual environment. So a class period online could look very similar. We might see a short whole group live or recorded lesson, followed by a small group meeting with the teachers while the rest of the students are doing some independent practice. And then everyone might come back to a closing and reflect on learning. Obviously, there's many, many types of lesson structures, but this would be one example of what that might look like. So just like in the building, during a lesson, you would have time with the teacher, you would have time maybe with some digital resources, and you would have time to practice. So on the next slide, we'll see some definitions, and it's important that we are all familiar and using the same terminology. So on the schedules that went out, you saw a lot of sessions that said live. And then there were some disclaimers there. Live will be, that means the teacher will be available to facilitate at least part of that session. So as I just described, that might be a mix of the teacher introducing the lesson live. It might be followed by a recorded video or some independent practice. And then it might, and that might include class meetings. That might be whole group, it might be small group, and it might be independent. When we say synchronous, we mean that just like this, the teacher is talking live and the students can respond. And then asynchronous means it is recorded or prepared in advance. And the advantage to that, obviously, is that students can do it at any time they choose. And then we have Wellness Wednesday. We know that right now we are all dealing with a collective trauma, and we find that it's very important that we have to address that. And so we have a district-wide initiative to provide lessons on topics of equity, wellness, social emotional learning, and increasing engagement, specifically on Wednesday. Of course, we will do that throughout the week in every lesson, but we want to focus on those specific targeted that work on Wednesday. So on the next slide, we'll talk about where did this plan come from? So where did these schedules come from? Where did this learning plan come from? We did have a team of CSD educators and some outside community members that worked with us throughout the summer. The first thing we did was dig deeply into the surveys that were conducted with the pre-K-12 parents, teachers, and secondary students back in May to we asked for their experience, for them to share your experiences with the online learning in the spring. And so we gathered a ton of data from those surveys, and we really looked at what was successful, what wasn't, where did we need to improve. And this is just a little snippet of some of the most important trends that we felt that we saw in the surveys. And the highlighted areas are areas where we saw that were reflected in all three surveys. So the parents, the teachers, and the students all had a desire for a more typical schedule, for simplified and centralized delivery. And they felt that the most effective form of our delivery of instruction was small group synchronous. So the next slide, the next thing we did during the summer, was to do research, and we did a ton of research. We read massive amounts of information from educational journals. We looked at functioning virtual schools. We watched webinars. We reviewed work from other districts, and we had Dr. Banks, our equity coordinator, train the team on utilizing a racial equity tool for decision making so that we could ensure our work was viewed through a racial equity lens. So some of the guidelines suggested in the research that we tried to follow in creating the schedules and the recommendations to the district leaders were as follows. So create consistent and regular opportunities for staff and student check-ins and peer-to-peer learning, regular opportunities for live video instruction by teachers, virtual and social distance physical activities, intervention supports and other related services. So if students were receiving therapy or special education services or intervention services in the building, we need to ensure that those are being provided. We need to focus on ensuring mental health and behavioral services are available, and we need to be sure that all of our students have adequate access to technology. So some of the questions and comments that we had were about the schedules. So let's start there. The pre-K and the K2 schedules are different, but there are many similarities. Yeah, we can look at one. Maggie, if you'd like to click on one. So in addition to the best practices that we identified through our research and through the surveys, pre-K also follows the guidance of the Georgia Department of Early Care and Learning, or Right from the Start, whereas K2 follows guidelines from the Georgia Department of Education. Guidelines state that the Georgia Department of Education guidelines state that students receive 4 hours of instruction daily. And it's important to note that in the spring, schools were given waivers. So there were no attendance requirements, there were no grading requirements, there were no testing requirements. Basically, schools had the option to close in the spring. We never closed. We continue to provide our students instruction, but none of that is the case now. In Georgia, school is mandatory for students age 6 to 16. It's compulsory, and right now there are no waivers granted, so students are required to attend school. So we did get some questions about if parents choose to homeschool. We certainly hope you will not do that. We want our students all here with us, but that is certainly an option that parents have. If you choose to withdraw your students in homeschool, then you register that intent to homeschool with the Georgia Department of Education. You select a homeschool program, and you complete the documentation. But again, I hope that no one would choose to do that. We will certainly work with you to offer the best solution for your students. I know that. There were a lot of questions about attendance as well. So attendance is required. How will it be taken? The good news is we have a lot of flexibility on that. So attendance is required, but the flexibility is that what can it look like? It does not mean that your child has to attend every single live session. We understand the difficulty and challenges that families are facing right now, trying to work from home, trying to manage students, etc. And we understand you need flexibility. All live sessions will be recorded, and students can watch them later and participate in the learning later. In elementary school, we typically we do take attendance once a day, and that will continue. In the upper grades, it's by period. So while we are virtual, what attendance means is that you have either attended a live session, you have completed daily assignments, or you have had some kind of interaction with your teacher that day. Just like in the school building, being present doesn't equate to participation. So participation and achievement are different than being physically present. So just like in the virtual environment, we have, like I said, lots of flexibility with that. So we want to be, our students are accountable for the learning. So even if they're absent, they can review the live sessions and have that flexibility. All right, we had a lot of questions and concerns about the amount of time, like screen time, and how much time students will be sitting in front of the screen. So as far as sitting, in a typical school day, the majority of time is sitting. We combat that in the school building by breaking up the day into lots of breaks, by getting the students up and moving. We use shorter lessons that are more appropriate for this age group and their time span. Screen time is certainly a concern for all of us, but there are a few important notes to that. Most of the organizations, including the American Association of Pediatrics, do make the distinction between passive screen time and active screen time, where students are engaged in learning and connecting with others. These organizations also suggest combating any potential negative effects by seriously limiting screen time outside of learning, and by ensuring that all students get the recommended 3 hours of daily physical exercise. So, speaking of physical activity, we got some questions about specials and specifically PE. The PE teachers in the K-2 schools will follow the guidelines set forth in the CSD. We have created some guidelines for virtual learning and the schedule set by the school. All the PE teachers are working diligently to ensure that the content and experiences that they deliver are equitable, engaging, and best practices. Lessons will connect to the Georgia Performance Standards for Physical Education in K-2 and using a variety of resources and tools. So students can expect lessons from their teachers each week, be provided choices, complete a weekly physical activity log, and demonstrate knowledge and a level of enjoyment using the Google tools. So the PE teachers that I spoke with said that they look forward to inspiring and empowering their students enrolled in CSE to be lifelong movers and advocates for their own health during virtual learning. We also had a lot of questions, and I know this is where the most frustration lies, is how will families manage this families that have to manage this. I do not have an easy answer to that. I have an incredible amount of empathy and sympathy for you. I know this is terrible, terribly challenging for everyone. And it's a massive problem that families are facing worldwide. I know it's a very stressful situation, and we do understand that. I can suggest that you adopt the motto offered by the Georgia Department of Education as we have, and that is to choose compassion over compliance and to do the best you can. We understand that some working parents can't be flexible with their time, and thus we are trying to provide as much flexibility as we can. I would suggest trying to be creative. Can you divide up your day or week differently than you typically would? We know time has taken on different meanings during this period for us. Can you support your child in the evenings or on weekends? Can you make time for them to attend some sessions every day or some days each week live with their teacher? Routines and schedules are important for all of us, especially children. So try to find what will work for your family and create a daily or weekly routine. We have created a website with resources and organizational tools to help families set up for home learning. It is a work in progress and it's being updated daily. And so within the next week, you will be receiving that as well as a parent handbook that will give you a lot more information. Supplies needed and an overview of the work will be provided in advance to help you organize and gather your materials for your child. And we also suggest that you communicate with your teacher. If your child cannot attend a session or complete everything, our teachers are creative and passionate. And if you communicate, I know they will try to find a solution to help you and your child and what will work best for you. Finally, we're partnering with DEF to match families with centers that can provide in-person supervision. In addition to, they are helping us connect families with childcare support, learning and tutoring support, student behavioral health, and parent support resources as well. In addition, they are, if you can serve as a mentor or want to donate or volunteer, DEF is asking for that as well. And I believe more information about that will be coming home very soon too. And I know you guys have, we have sent out the readiness survey, and when I spoke with DEF this week, that's what they said. They're waiting on, all the data to come in so that they know exactly where their focus is and who needs what in the community so that they can meet the needs of the community based on actual need based on that survey. So if you have not filled out the readiness survey yet, please do so we know exactly what you need and we can help you find that. As we talked about previously, lessons can look many different ways. And the exact amount of time that children are in front of the screen will depend on the specific lesson design. But we have the accountability to provide a full day of instruction, and currently our only avenue to do so is virtually. So we are aware of the recommended screen time, and we are trying to work on making it, like I said, making that difference between passive consumption of materials and active learning. So it can be really hard for us to judge the lesson effectiveness online. And as I mentioned before, if you find things aren't flowing well in your child's day, please provide feedback to your teacher, and the principals are here. We're all here to help you and to make those adjustments. Administrators will be observing and providing feedback to teachers as we do. But that's a snapshot and you have the big picture. So if we work together, we can continuously improve the experience for our students. We're aware that parents want to work together and to support their students, and we are asking teachers to collaborate and work together so that we're aligning our standards that we're working on each week to help you as parents with that, regardless of the amount. So the teachers are still virtual, regardless of the involvement of the teachers with very young children, they're still going to need help and supervision. And we understand that. So parents will help ensure the children are organized and online, and we will be providing as much support online as we can. Those routines and procedures, doing the same thing each day, will help your child become more independent. So if you can allow your children to do it themselves, even if it takes them 20 minutes to log on, which it does for the first few times in kindergarten and pre-K, then you can teach them that independence, and that gradual release will help them work through things themselves. Another question was, will we be providing textbooks and workbooks? We don't use a lot of textbooks and workbooks in the schools. We will be providing home kits, and we will be providing take-home consumable. I know pre-K will be providing consumables every 2 weeks. And we are preparing at-home kits as well. Students will receive a phonics kit. We're working on securing some math manipulatives and some other supplies from the schools. So we'll be also arranging contactless library checkouts, and we're incorporating handwriting. There were some questions about handwriting. That's always incorporated into our daily lessons as well. There were also some questions about the intervention block. Intervention block is a time that we have in our school day. Some schools call it win time. Other schools have different names for it, but that's a time where some students receive services like links, EIP, or special education support. Other students at that time are practicing skills. There's no new content taught during that time, so everyone is kind of getting what they need, and that's what the WIN block stood for, but that is what intervention block is. There was also some questions about why are there two language arts blocks during the day? Well, at this age, most of what we're teaching children to read and write, and we're teaching phonemic awareness. So it is the majority of the day is spent on language arts, and it's just such a long block that it's generally divided up. So while in the school day, you might have the reading block, the writing block, and the phonics block, here we just called it English Language Arts 1 and English Language Arts 2 to give the teachers more flexibility. There were also some questions about math, and math being in the afternoon and versus when could it be in the morning and things like that. That is always a struggle with planning schedules. Everybody wants everything in the morning, and we can't have everything in the morning. So it just depends on how the schedule falls out. So like I said, our focus is at this age is most on literacy, but it also depends on where our intervention teachers can push in and things like that. So there's a lot that goes into the schedule. So students also love math, and so a lot of times many students, let me rephrase that, love math, and so it's okay. They don't mind in the afternoon. So we will continue some questions. There were some questions about assessment, and we will continue screening students this year, and we will determine their levels and readiness. We are not planning all of our typical battery of assessments that we do, just because they're not conducive online. But Georgia has applied for a federal testing waiver that has not been approved yet. So as with everything we know, this is a constantly evolving situation. So everything I'm saying is accurate as of today, but that's my disclaimer. I don't know what will happen tomorrow. Pre-K is requiring the teachers continue to assess and monitor students through work sampling online platform. And in K2, we will be administering GKIDS, which is the Kindergarten Inventory of Developing Skills. In K1, we'll be doing STAR early literacy testing. In second grade, STAR reading. And in first and second grade, we will be doing Keenville formative assessments through the Georgia Department of Education, and they are a game-based literacy and math platform.
Kristy, did you want me to go back to the slide about and show a little bit of the Parent Supports website?
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
You want to walk me through navigating that?
Yep. So like I said, it is a work in progress, and we are working on getting some more pieces up there for you. There's also a parent handbook that will come home. Right now, what you have up here are some tools that will help you to actually understand the Google applications for education. And how to walk through and navigate those tools. There's also some help and suggestions when you see down there, Education Reimagined help for parents and families. That's these little, the links right here, yeah. And then the CDC has put out a virtual learning checklist for parents, just some things to think about as we get prepared to start in a couple of weeks, just things that will make your life a little bit easier. So that's what we have up right now. And like I said, in the next couple of weeks, you can expect to see more things to help and support you.
Kristy, as we were going, as you were sharing answers to all these great questions, a couple questions were still coming in on the virtual question form, and one that I see a pattern on is a question about crew and what that's like. And I think that ties nicely into our EL framework in our K-2 schools. Do you want to take a little time and give parents who aren't familiar with EL and or maybe the crew structure a little more detail about that process and why that is so important for our K-2 schools?
Sure. So we are crew, not passengers, is the motto of, or one of the mottos of EL education. And so as EL education, that is our framework that we use in the K-2 schools. We try to teach our children, well, the whole child, and we focus on character education as well as our core practices in academics. And so creating that sense of belonging through the structure of crew, that we are all important to our class, that we all have a special place and purpose, and that we are all important members of that crew, is something that we have an intense focus on. In addition to that, as I mentioned, you know, in this time especially, we need to be so intentionally focused on social emotional well-being, on trauma-informed instruction and all of that. So we want to be sure that our students are feeling connected to their teachers and to one another, that we are really fostering that sense of community, that we are fostering that sense of class and classroom culture. And so we do that through crew meetings. And so that is in preschool, I know in pre-K, I know they call it morning meetings. And so these are very important times where students have a chance to share, hear about one another, learn about one another, and really form that bond as a crew or a classroom. So those are really important times for the students, and that is also connected to the closing circle where they can go back through their day, kind of debrief on the day, what went well, what didn't, and again, just connect and then disconnect from their classroom. So.
Thank you, Kristy. Another question we saw a lot of was the lunch times, and I know we did make a change to our lunch times for 3-5. You want to share a little bit more about that and why it's important that we aligned those?
Yes, so there is a consistent time between about 11:30 and 1 o'clock. There should be at least 45 minutes where everyone across the district has a common lunchtime. There was a little glitch with 4th and 5th grade when the schedules first went out, but that was quickly recognized and the principals jumped right on it and corrected that. Or not corrected, but adjusted that so that we could all be aligned. And yeah, that's an important time because there will be lunch pickups throughout the day, or not throughout the day, but at the designated pickup spots during that time that families can pick up lunch if they need to. And then that will give families a time to have lunch and play time together during the day.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Beam. Appreciate your input and getting a lot of these digital learning tools ready for our families. So parents, you may be wondering, where do you go from here? So as Dr. Beam talked about, the parent handbook for virtual learning will be shared shortly. We were just putting some finishing touches on that. start thinking about how to create the schedule that's going to work best for your family. And if that means, as Dr. Beam mentioned, certain times you're plugging in for live sessions, certain other times you're watching the recorded sessions after work hours are over or on a weekend. We're trying to create as much flexibility in our schedules for our families because we know you are working family members and you've got a lot going on in your households as well. And then also once that parent resource webpage is launched, take a look through that so that you can become familiar with that. So next steps as a school district, we've kind of created a lot of guidelines and tools for our principals. So you should look for more information from your school principals on what next steps are going to be at your school. We have five K2 schools, but all of our principals collaborate very, very much on what they do and how they operate. So they are going to be your next best resource for getting your questions answered and finding out more information. This Wednesday, we will be releasing who the students' teachers are, so that your teacher is going to be then your next resource. They're going to have all the specifics and details that a lot of you are looking for. At the district level, we try to create guidance and policies and procedures for our schools to follow and implement so that they can do what's best for their communities and for their classrooms. The next thing also to look for from your schools is, believe it, we are very, very eager to bring students back into our classrooms and to our buildings as soon as we possibly can. Each school is going to have a local school COVID mitigation team, and that team will work with the principal to make sure that they've gone through this large document that outlines all the steps necessary and procedures and safeguards that will be put into place so that when it is time in our community to bring students back into the building, that we are ready well ahead of time for that. So principals will be sharing probably next week a form with parents to sign up if you are interested in serving on that committee. And then I think the next best thing that all of our families can do is to do as much as you can as a household and as a family to reduce the spread of COVID in our community. We know that the spread of COVID and the mitigation efforts are really what's holding us back from being able to bring our students back in person as well as our teachers. And at this point, it is just not safe to do so within this current context. So everything you can do, we ask that you do so that we can slow the spread of this virus, make sure our mitigation efforts are working, and bring our students and our teachers back into our buildings as soon as we possibly can. We want to thank you for taking time tonight. We are going to post the recording of this webinar as soon as we've got it loaded up so that you can re-listen to it. We'll also post the links to make sure that you can access those on our Opening 2020 webpage. I want to thank you again for your participation tonight. And tomorrow night we are doing our 3-5 presentation, followed by 6-8 on Wednesday, and then our 9-12 on Thursday. So hopefully you have gotten some of your questions answered. We know probably not all of them, but again, thank you for being here tonight, and we appreciate all your support. Have a good evening.